line with us. Chairman, it's Helen Snell. I can confirm that the live stream has commenced. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the virtual meeting of the Tamar Bridge and Torpoint Ferry Joint Committee. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting is being live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn for a short period to try to re-establish connection. As I call members to speak, I will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the democratic officer will advise you. The vote will be taken by roll call and the results announced by the democratic officer. Members must be present for the duration of the discussion on each agenda item in order to be able to vote. We have public questions for the meeting today, and the questionnaire will be joining the meeting by telephone. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosure pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm the protocol for today's meeting is that members of the committee who wish to speak on an item should indicate by using an X in the chat function. Before we start today's business, I will ask the Democratic Service Officer to ask all committee members to confirm that they are present and state their electoral division.
Thank you, Chairman. Please, when I call your name, confirm your name and electoral division. Councillor Brown.
Yes, good morning. I represent Newquay Central.
Councillor Buchan.
Morning, Councillor Pam Buchan. I represent Plymouth City Council, Honecknall Ward.
Councillor Coker.
Mark Coker, Plymouth City Council, Devonport Ward.
Councillor Lennox Boyd.
Good morning, Sheila Lennox Boyd, representing Saltash North.
Councillor Davis.
Morning, Councillor Gary Davis, representing Torpoint East.
Councillor Dreen.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Jonathan Dreen, Plymouth City Council, representing Budshead Ward.
Councillor Holly, I believe, is late arrival, so he's not here at the moment. Councillor Leaves.
Yes, Michael Leaves, representing Plymouth City Council, Plymouth Stock Bradford Ward.
Councillor Tamlin.
Good morning, Sam Tamlin, Cornwall Councillor for Saltash West.
And Councillor Wheeler.
Good morning, George Wheeler, Plymouth City Councillor for St Buda Ward.
Okay, we also have the following officers present. We have from Tamar Crossings, David List, Andrew Vallance, Simon James, Mark Meredith, Adrian Trim and Richard Cole. From Plymouth City Council, we have Hannah West, Philip Robinson and David Callenter. And from Cornwall Council, we have Geraldine Baker, Leah Musto-Shinton, Jamie Wright, Vicky Fraser, Rick Clayton, Paul White and myself, Rowena Brebner, Democratic Officer. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Before we move, I would like to inform members that I have an agreement with the Vice Chair, changed certain running order of the agenda. So we will do items 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 5, 7 and 9. Thank you. We now move to item 1, apologies for absence. Have we any today?
We don't have any apologies, but Councillor Holly will be late arrival.
Thank you very much. Item number 2.
Sorry, Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Brown.
Just apologies for early departure. I have to leave at 11:30 for another meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any other? No? Right. Item number 2, are there any declarations of interest that members wish to share? Please put an X in the chat box. I can confirm that there are no declarations of interest by members for today's meeting. I now move to minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of December and ask if any member has got any comments on the meetings, please indicate now. Okay, there seems to be no minute adjustments, so therefore I declare that the minutes of the
Chairman,
meeting,
can someone
yes,
formally move and second, and I'll take a roll call vote to actually approve the minutes.
I was just going to do that. I was just going to call.
Thank
So
you.
could I have a proposer for the accuracy of the minutes? Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. And could we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor. I can't see who that is.
Councillor Tamlin.
Councillor Tamlin, thank you very much.
I'll do the roll call vote for that, Chairman. Please indicate if you are for, against or abstaining. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan. Councillor Buchan, can you indicate how you're voting for the minutes? For. Councillor Coker.
For.
Councillor Lennox Boyd.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Leaves.
For.
Councillor Tamlin.
For.
And Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So that's approved. We now move on to item number 4, questions from the public. And I believe that we have a question from Mr. Miller, who's going to join us by telephone. Good morning, Mr. Miller. Are you there?
Chairman, if Mr. Miller could press *6 to unmute his telephone, there was some background noise, so he needed to be muted.
Okay. I hope Mr. Miller heard that. Good morning, Mr.
I think I've done that. Yeah, good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Mr. Miller, would you like to read your question or ask your question?
I will. It's
or would you like me?
If you'd like to read it, that would be fine by me. Thank you. Maybe clear from your end.
Okay. The question for Mr. Miller was: given the self-styled characterisation of the Torpoint ferries as an essential public service, as justified for the expense of running at under 50% capacity, especially due to nominal loading during off-peak periods, what representations have been made to secure future ongoing subsidies locally or nationally, as previously discussed? Can you confirm, Mr. Miller, that that was your question?
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The response from the committee is the Torpoint Ferry is a key element of the local transport infrastructure. The service delivery level that was provided aims to meet demand and also provide an appropriate service frequency. The ferry vehicle occupancy rate before the pandemic was typically around 50% across the full weekly cycle, including the night service. And this compares very favourably with typical occupancy rates on public transport generally. The Tamar Bridge and Torpoint Ferry Joint Committee Chairman and the transport portfolio holders of both parent authorities, Cornwall Council and Plymouth City Council, have made representations to the Department of Transport seeking financial support for the operation and maintenance of the Tamar Bridge. Officers are now in dialogue with Highways England in this respect, and this is noted in the report, agenda item 8 of today's meeting. Mr. Miller, have you a supplementary that you would like to ask?
Well, yes, I'm aware of all that, thank you very much. But the question was, and as was previously discussed, was this potentially seek some subsidy for the ferry specifically, as other services nationally are, some are, because it's treated as an essential service and it has to run effectively at quite a loss to provide that service. And there was discussion about that should be investigated about a year or so ago. I'm sure it's pre-COVID, and I'm just not. My question is: has that progressed any further? Has any funding been sought since then? Thank you.
I will. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Miller. I will get the Chair, David List, to answer that question for you.
Great. There may not be a complete answer now. I accept that.
Thank you for preempting my answer, Mr. Miller. Yeah, I think we'll need to go back and research the exact discussions you're talking about, and then we'll come back to you with a written answer within a very limited period.
Yes, I haven't had my chance to find out where that was minted, to be honest. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Nice to speak to you.
Could I just ask? Can I stay on this call because I can't seem to get the meeting up on Teams? The link in there, one of the links is wrong, and my machine won't run it. Can I stay on this call?
The Democratic officer like to answer Mr. Miller's query?
Normally, we would only expect the person to stay on the call until they had actually spoken. I'm not aware there are any technical issues, so you should be able to watch it via the live stream. I'm not aware of any reasons why you wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, the first one was there were 2 links on the thing, and I was trying to get in on the second link, which I assumed was a public link.
No, the second link is the link from the link, and the second one is from 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock because we're not sure of the duration of this meeting. If you use the first link, which is from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m, you should have no problems watching the meeting. Yeah. Which will also stay on there after the meeting, so you can view it historically as well.
I can't get in via the first link at all, so I don't know what the problem is there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. We now move to item number 6, which is Councillor Holly here at present?
No, it doesn't appear he is, Chairman.
Okay. I know Councillor Holly has a specific interest in this subject, and with members' permission, I will actually drop that down the agenda to give Councillor Holly the opportunity. So if we move to item number 8, which is the COVID-19 financial impacts and future financing. So if I could hand that over, please, to the lead officer.
That'll be me, Chair. I'm just trying to locate it in my electronic pack here. So this is on page 108 of our pack. Thank you, Chair. This report summarises our contemporary position with regard to our finances and the ongoing effect of COVID, and presents some context for any income increases that we will need to resolve our financial position. So First of all, the report covers the previous meetings of the Joint Committee and the workshop that we had, and goes through some options that we used at the workshop to illustrate the effect of various changes to our toll structure and the effect they would have on income. The current position is shown on page 112. It shows our deteriorating reserves position over the forthcoming financial years, predicting reserves at the end of this financial year of just over 2 million, going down to just under 500,000 at the end of this for the next financial year, 21-22, and then decreasing quite significantly over the subsequent years. So that's our current situation, heading towards a deficit of nearly 10 million by 2024-25. So that illustrates the situation we're in. As members are aware, we are receiving some government support for lost income, but there is no indication that that will be carrying on beyond the end of June of this year. So our modelling assumes that that government support stops in June. So that support is obviously helping us through this current lockdown, and the traffic figures were shown at the workshop. Both crossings now running nearly 70% traffic, which is a bit better than our model, and the government support obviously also blunts that effect. The options that we discussed at the workshop are repeated here in the report. The first one we discussed was a 20% increase excuse me, in both tag and cash crossings. The tag as soon as we reasonably can, June of this year, and the cash increases as soon as we think we reasonably can, April of next year, because of the delay involved in going through the Department for Transport and the formal process to get tolls increased. The next two options, B and C, are 25% increases and 30% increases respectively, which would be based on waiting until June meeting of the Joint Committee to review the position, to look at the way excuse me, lockdown has evolved, knowing hopefully a bit more about government support, both in terms of lockdown support and also in terms of possible Highways England support, and then basing a decision on that more, I suppose, on a reduced increased certainty of the situation in the summer. On page 116 of the report, it compares the impact of those options, and it shows that the early intervention option doesn't get us above 2 million reserves, and nor does the 25% option. In fact, members will have heard that officers feel that the 2 million reserves level is something we really need to aim for, and that position certainly hasn't changed, and even the option C with 30% intervention only gets near that 2 million reserves position. As members are aware, there are lots of uncertainties around this situation. We don't know in particular how traffic here is going to recover after this lockdown. The government's road plan forward is quite positive, but at the moment our model assumes 90% of pre-COVID income into the future. In the short term, that may be a little optimistic, and long term it may be a little pessimistic, but we feel we've got to be prudent about that forecasting because we don't have any other contingency. Obviously there are risks associated with early intervention, having a decision based on limited information, uncertainty about support funding, and there are risks associated with later intervention, in that it's likely that the toll increases will then need maybe higher. I'm afraid there's no magic solution to this situation. We will need more income than we are expecting to keep our reserves positive and near the 2 million mark. So based on officer discussion, it's being on balance of opinion, it seems that early intervention isn't really feasible because of the governance issues involved with doing that. And therefore the recommendation in the report is to defer a decision until the scheduled June meeting of the Joint Committee after the elections, where an updated report and some updated intervention options would be presented. And I also anticipate we'd need a workshop associated with that exercise. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. I note the recommendations from the committee, and I'm now just going to hand it over to members. So I've got the first member to come up is not very clear. It says GC on my list. So whoever that is that Gary?
Councillor Brown, I think.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. And yeah, I would agree with David's summary of the situation. Whilst I recognise the concerns regarding the financial future of the crossings, this pandemic has been exceptional, and the recovery may take some time. And what we're looking at are lots of ifs, buts, and maybes at the moment. Traffic may recover to 90%. Given the exceptional bookings in Cornwall for staycations this summer, I think it may even exceed 90%. We're still not certain what funding we'll get from government for COVID loss recovery. We've again written to Highways England and DFT to secure funding for the A30 across the bridge. So for lots of reasons, we're not sure what the financial position will be. So I think it's far better to defer until June, when we'll have a much clearer picture of the way ahead. So for those reasons, I'm supportive of the recommendations as set out and happy to propose that.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We now move to Councillor Wheeler.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I agree with Councillor Brown, but for rather different reasons. I think this is the most important issue. Well, I think it's clearly the most important issue facing the committee at the moment. And as the report points out, delay actually only makes it worse. But Councillor Brown pointed out there are lots of unknowns, and that in itself is sufficient to perhaps to justify delay. Although I would have preferred to have debated that in greater length. However, for me, the critical issue is the one shown in paragraph 111 of the report, which Mr. List did draw our attention to. If we reach a decision on this today, or if we were to have a long debate and reach a decision on this today, it would clearly affect our budgets. Anything that affects our budgets has to be agreed by the two parent authorities, Cornwall Council and Plymouth City Council. Today is the 12th of March. PERDA starts on the 23rd of March. There are 10 working days in between now and the start of PERDA when both councils are unable to make any further decisions, any further critical decisions, controversial decisions. To get the parent authority's approval, any proposal from us would have to go first through the two councils' cabinets, and then through the two councils themselves. To take a decision, there has to be five working days has to be given between the publishing of the agenda and the meeting in both of those cases, which means it's physically impossible to get any decision that we made today ratified by the two councils. It's a very unfortunate position. Our governance really needs to be addressed here. I hope we'll be able to get round to doing that next year, but that's the governance we're stuck with this year. If we make a decision today, it will make no difference whatsoever to anybody. The two cabinets and the councils won't consider that decision until the end of May next year. Our next meeting is in June next year. we might as well make the decision then when some of the issues that Councillor Brown pointed out and are pointed out in the report, some of them will have become clearer then. So the decision that we made will have a better basis. So I think any decision we made today, because that won't be actioned, there seems very little point in trying to make a decision, and in fact very little point in having any discussion at all. It's a very unfortunate situation, but that's the situation we're in. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I've got Councillor Dream wishing to speak. Councillor Dream.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'll be supporting the recommendations and thank Mr. List for the praise he gave there. I agree with the previous speakers as well. There are many unknowns which we don't know at the moment, and maybe by June, the next meeting, they may become clear. I just wanted to ask, Chair, what members thought. Mr. List said that our projections are on 90% of traffic on the bridge there at the moment. Do you think we should look at a lesser figure, maybe 80 or 85%, given all the unknowns? I just put that out there to see what people thought of that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dream. Councillor Tamlin.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to speak, but I just wondered if you wanted to bring in Councillor Holly first, because he keeps indicating with his hand instead of putting a cross in the box.
All right, okay. Councillor Holly, sorry, I was only looking for crosses.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, thank you very much, and I'm very sorry for my late arrival. I'm not going to repeat anything that's been said, particularly about the actual difficulties in getting things through Cabinet. So that's obviously correct, and thank you for putting it so clearly. The report I thought is good. Thank you, David and Andrew, to the team for that great report, and pretty fair, I thought. And Jeff, thanks for being so supportive of this, Jeff from Cornwall, and it's really good to have your support on the Tamar Bridge. Yes, I agree with the recommendation. I got one question I'd like to ask though, and it's one that niggles at me, and I've raised it before, and it still niggles at me, and this is the reserve position amount. I know in the long term, by the time we get to 2024 and 25, the scale of the reserves makes this less important. But the £2 million, I was at the meeting when we set that £2 million. It was probably about 10 years ago now, I think, no, perhaps 9 years ago now. And it wasn't, it's wrong to say it was a figure plucked out of the air, Mr. Chairman, but at the time the officers couldn't put, understandably, as they can't now, in a good position on the reserves or what we might need. And by sort of, we talked about 1 million, we talked about 3 million, and we sort of came to this position of 2 million. And I'm still, because of the way we came to this, I'm still a little bit iffy about it. But as David quite correctly said, you know, by the time we get to 2024, we're in a desperate position anyway. So, you know, even if the reserves were zero, then we'd still be in a bad position. So that's the only point I'd like to make. And thank you very much. I agree, Mr. Chairman, with the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Holly. Councillor Tamlin, then David List, and then we will move to the next stage. Councillor Tamlin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I basically agree with Councillor Brown and Wheeler. I think we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation for multiple reasons. And we're trying to make a decision at exactly the wrong time because of PERDA. There isn't much clarity, and I think Councillor Dreen highlighted that perfectly by suggesting that we look at 80% instead of 90%. I mean, if we're going to do that, we might as well look at 100% as well, because I don't think anybody knows which way it's going to go. So maybe we need to have a look at a fan like the officers have done previously. But yeah, I agree with the recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Tamlin. David List.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was 2 points really. Just picking up on what Councillor Dreen said earlier, and also Councillor Tamlin just then. Officers have been discussing this modelling that we currently have, and it's quite clear that in May, in advance of the June Joint Committee meeting, we'll need to do a lot of work looking at the model, reviewing the numbers. I think Councillor Tamlin's idea of using the fan to illustrate the situation we've used before and is very useful. We'll know hopefully a lot more about the way traffic's evolving by then. So I think that that's an important important issue for us. Then on the reserves issue, Councillor Holly has raised this point before. The 2 million reserves that we came up with was a response to the toll increase we had back in 2010. So it was, as he says, about 10 years ago. And the idea of it is more about giving us some time to resolve a situation rather than to pay off any bills. It gives us, it's related to cash flow. It isn't the same as our cash in the bank, but it gives us some cash flow protection and protects the parent authorities from risk, if you like. It's worth saying that 2 million reserves was established when our turnover was about 2/3 of what it is now. And there is an argument for it being reviewed upwards. But I think Councillor Holly's quite right. It's an important part of our model is how we set that minimum reserves level. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I do think we are living in strange times and things are changing nationally by the minute. I have had a proposal originally from Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown, could you indicate in the X that you are happy to propose that? Thank you, Councillor Brown. If I could have a seconder, and then I will hand over. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler, and I will now hand over to Democratic support.
Thank you. Please indicate how you wish to vote when I call your name. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Coker.
For.
Councillor Lennox-Boyd.
For.
Councillor Davis. Councillor Davis, can you indicate how you wish to vote, please?
Sorry, that was a 4.
Thank you. Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Holly.
For.
Councillor Leaves.
For.
Councillor Tamlin.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Thank you. That's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we now move to item number 6, the review of welfare of residents residing below the Tamar Bridge and potential mitigating measures, which are in your report from pages 46 to 81. And I will hand over to the officer to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. Just scrolling to that item. Thank you. This report really picks up on the decision of the Joint Committee at the end of October 2019, asking officers to review the welfare of residents residing below the bridge and what action can be taken, which may or may not include raising the parapet. The action on this has been affected by the pandemic, both in terms of our internal resources and also engagement with other agencies, which by definition have been heavily involved in the COVID response. So apologies for the progress that we've made on this, but we are pleased that we've been able now to present a substantial review on this position. So the first part of the report talks about the Neighbour experience questionnaire that we distributed in November and December last year to 72 residences in catchments which are shown on page 49 on each side of the crossing, identifying what we believe to be the relevant neighbours that members have concerns about. Response rate was 25%, as you would probably have expected, predominantly from the Saltash side, where the majority of those residences are, but also some from the Plymouth side. The questionnaire responses were largely as anticipated and largely, I imagine, as members anticipated, and they're on pages 49, summarised on pages 49 through to 51, and in more detail at Appendix to the report. The nature of those, the distribution of those are illustrated in a pie chart figure 2 on page 52, which shows the split of the antisocial behaviour incidents over the period, the 4-year period that we've looked at. And I think it's worth members noting that over half of our antisocial behaviour incidents are actually not above the side spans, but obviously are less directly affecting local and neighbours. The concern for welfare incidents are also relevant. The distribution of those by their nature is shown on page 53 and shows the distribution by year and the nature of them, about whether they affected the parapet, whether the parapet was climbed or not. The consultation with external parties showed that I think we've covered the elements that members are concerned about and have been informed about, and we've heavily discussed at various workshops over the last 3 to 4 years. Benchmarking with other crossings didn't really reveal anything in particular that we are not doing, and we believe that the provisions we have in place in terms of soft and physical measures are well in line with industry practice. We've looked at the measures we might possibly take to mitigate the situation. The soft measures we've looked at, we are highlighting community engagement in paragraphs 226 to 228. This situation meshes very nicely with our learning centre programme and also with our forthcoming 60th anniversary. And we think this is a good opportunity to mesh those things and use this opportunity to introduce some soft measures, improving the profile of the bridge as part of the local infrastructure by using an art celebration and utilising the panels on the side spans to celebrate that art. And the idea is to engage local young people and community groups in that exercise. So one of the proposals in the report is that we have that we implement this project to cost around 20 to 40,000, depending on the extent of the coverage of the artwork. And we believe that is within the project budget, which we already have approval for. Then we look at the physical measures, and we've discussed these at some length in previous discussions about the parapets. And members will be familiar with the graphics like we have shown here on page 57, showing different heights of parapet, and we've summarised the effects of those options in a table on page 59. The two options that are changing the situation in terms of parapets are increasing height to 1.8 metres and 2.1 metres, which we believe are two sensible choices if we do want to intervene. I'll explain the 1.8 metres. That is chosen both because it is about 6 feet, about as high as probably the 95th percentile male's eyes might be in the UK. Therefore, the chance of somebody looking over 1.8 metres are very limited. And in particular, we can get an off-the-shelf 1.8 metre high parapet, which we believe is actually a better solution than trying to modify the existing 1.5 metre parapets. So that is one way forward. The intervention, the implications of that intervention are quite significant, because if we take down the existing parapet and replace it with a new one, during that work we will have no effective parapet protection, and so there'll be more disruption in doing that work than there actually would be in raising the parapet to 2.1 metres, where we don't have an off-the-shelf solution and would involve actually adding height to the existing parapets. We think the price for those two options is very similar, around 1.5 million, and that is within the budget that we have approved by both parent authorities already. We have extensive CCTV monitoring, as members are aware, and we are looking at we're obviously constantly reviewing that and using the latest technology. It's worth saying that both of the interventions, raising the parapet height and plating them with solid panels, will mean that our visibility of any activity the other side of those parapets, if anybody gets over them, is currently inadequate, and we would need to increase our CCTV coverage. It's also worth noting that recovering people who get the wrong side of the parapet will be a challenge, much more so than with the current 1.5 metre parapets. And quite a few members here today went up to our mock-up of higher parapets up at our engineering contractors workshops, and we would need to be working with emergency services to look at the ways to recover people from the other side of higher parapets, and that would, I imagine, include removable panels like we had envisaged previously. Another important point I think members need to note is that raising parapets above the side spans may displace concern for welfare activity to other parts of our own structure, and we need to bear that in mind. If we do just raise parapets locally, we may well get concern for welfare issues that are displaced from those areas to the main to the centre part of the bridge structure. So I think that summarises the report, and I don't know if members have now got any questions for me on that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was a really interesting report. Have members got any questions to ask? Please indicate in the box. Councillor Dream.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. List, thank you for the report there with all the details, which is great. You mentioned that there is funding there available for all the options there, but particularly options 2 and 3. I just wanted to ask, if we went for option 1, what would happen to those funds that are allocated for it? Would they go into reserves, or would they become available for any other works that were needed? I think I know the answer, but I thought I'd ask the question. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Green. I think you know the answer. The answer is that budget is specifically for those works. So things like the softer measures I've just described, we believe lie within that project, but we cannot use that money for other purposes. But clearly, the payments to fund that would not be made, and therefore our reserve position would improve because we're not spending that money. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, David. Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to say something strongly in support of the softer measures, because I think that's a really excellent project and an excellent idea, and definitely something that we should be trying regardless of any other decisions about parapets. I kind of wanted to put that forward. But I also had a question for David. If you could, sorry, could you just clarify about from the existing approved budgets, do you mean for the learning centre, or do you mean for the kind of parapet works or something else?
Thank you, Councillor Buchan. Yes, we have a 2 million approved budget for parapets and resolving this ASB issue. So that is adequate for everything described in this report.
Thank you.
Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for producing this report, David. I think it's a jolly good report. Can I just ask a question about the area of the surveillance when you did the questionnaire, the questions to residents? It seemed like you included this sort of 20 of the Dawes Court flats, which are on the north side of the bridge, and therefore those residents there, because that's where the traffic always is on the North Cantilever, are far less affected by antisocial or any other sort of behaviour than on the south side of the bridge. And yesterday I stood at the top of Lower 4th Street, and some of the older residents there, about 20 of them I counted, also seem to be included in the survey, and they are shielded by banks and trees, and it's low there, the bridge anyway, it's only a few feet above the embankment anyway. It just seemed a bit odd to include some of those houses in this survey, because clearly they aren't going to be so bothered. And most of the 20 odd houses that are severely affected are in Boscombe Row, Lower 4th Street at the bottom of the left, and down on the water side itself. So that's the first question. Can I ask you that?
Yeah, I think our approach was to be inclusive rather than exclusive. So we didn't just home in on the people who've been vocal. We wanted to make sure we captured all of the people which could have been affected by antisocial behaviour, because the question that was put to the report that was requested by members was about the welfare of residents living below the bridge. So I don't think there's anything really lost by having a rather larger catchment than you imagined, and we might have captured something that we weren't expecting, but as it happens, we didn't. But I'm not sure. We weren't trying to dilute the data in any way. We haven't filtered it in any way for you. So I think it's a neutral approach.
Okay, thank you. I just want the committee to bear in mind that it does include those houses that are far less affected by antisocial behaviour, and certainly by concern for welfare behaviour, than the others. David, are there any concern for welfare system incidents this year?
Oh, certainly, yes. And I can't give you numbers off the top of my head. One of my colleagues might be able to look it up before the end of this meeting. But we've had, I think I could say, Mark Meredith's on this meeting, but I think I could say I think they're about pro rata for a typical year.
There was one completed unfortunate concern for welfare incident, wasn't there? Yeah, there is. Thank you. The benchmarking, thanks for doing that, David. I know it was an exercise for you and you had to go here, there and everywhere, but I thought it was worthwhile doing it anyway. We had covered that box. And yeah, if we did raise the parapets, then we would have to increase the video, and the video is great. And what Pam has just said is absolutely first class, and I agree. Whatever happens, I do hope we do something that's that substantial, but we must do the soft measures anyway, because there's a lot to be gained by that anyway. I think that's great. David, this is not an engineering sort of question. Well, it is, but it's from the point of view of sort of considerable ignorance. If we put the 1.5 on, would it be possible, if we thought it wasn't sufficient in the future, to put 30 centimetres on the top? Make it 2.1.
So you mean 1.8? Yes. If we installed 1.8, we'd have the same sort of options to extend. There are some type approval issues about checking the modifications, if you like. We've established in previous reviews that we can extend the existing 1.5s up to, I think, 2.3. Richard may correct me, but I'm quite confident we'll be able to extend the 1.8 to 2.1, but it would involve a type approval check. I don't know if Richard is on the call, might be able to refresh my memory on that. Thank you.
Thanks, David. No, as you said, it was actually 2.6 we looked at for the full height, so we could raise it to 2.6, and certainly we could raise it to probably add the 300 on to the 1.8 to get the 2.1. But of course, that's extra money. Yeah, that will cost you another 1.5 million in future.
Yeah,
as well as replacing the parapet now. So, but it would be possible.
Okay, thank you. I'm not actually going to suggest that, because I think the option 3 is probably the best for us at the moment. In fact, Mr. Chairman, if you want a proposal, I'll make one now, and then you can discuss around it if you wish.
Yeah, carry on, Derek.
Okay.
Councillor Holly.
You probably know what I'm going to say. I'm not going to go through all the emotive stuff we've been through before about children underneath and that, watching people hanging off it, all that sort of stuff. We all know about that. I just think that the soft measures are really important, but they won't materially improve the concern for welfare. Excuse me a second. sorry, Mr. Chairman, I spend my life throwing those stones next door. The soft measures, great. I think we should do them anyway, but I don't think, in all reasonableness, that the artwork, etc., will materially affect what the concern for welfare instance that we're really concerned about, the ones that are on the serious end. And that's why, and because you've got an approved budget, and I think we should move to the next stage of looking at option 3 and taking into account the engineering factors, as Richard and David have pointed out, and if necessary, minimising the solid infill to reduce wind effects, so that, you know, we may have to have mesh. I realise that. I think option 3 is the only way to go now. Otherwise, this will just keep coming back to bite us time and time again into the future. I don't see it lessening. I think it's a reasonable solution at this time for the residents underneath, and the people, of course, who are affected outside of the area who watch these incidents take place. I take David's point completely about displacement activity. My concern is for the residents underneath the Plymouth side and underneath the Salt Ash side. That's my main concern. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to propose option 3.
Thank you, Councillor Holly. I have got a list. So Andrew Valance, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very quick clarification that on the soft measures and budget. The budget is a capital budget, so therefore if the soft measures were taken alone, it's unlike the funding for that would have to be found from other revenue budgets rather than a capital project. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got some significant personal experience of this sort of situation, having been in charge of the Coast Guard team in Newquay for 25 years. We had one very high profile area on the cliffs, which was fenced, but a very low fence, which used to cause us regular problems. We very often were called to talk people back, which we were very successful in doing on a number of occasions. They then decided in their wisdom to double the height of the fencing, which was fine, but people managed to work their way around from the ends, still ended up on the wrong side of the fence. And although we were able to dissuade them from doing anything foolish, we were then in the impossible position of not being able to get them back, which caused all sorts of problems, probably more problems than if we'd left them where the fence height was originally. So I'm not convinced that raising the height alone is going to be a solution. I do think potentially, possibly a solid height barrier at 1.8 might help, because that would at least would take away that vision from anybody standing at the top. But certainly I couldn't support option 3.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Brown's just referred to some of the things I wanted to say. I wanted to draw attention to the charts on page 53 and the number of people, in terms of concern for welfare, the number of people who have self-rescued and the assisted rescue. And we went through this when we talked about the parapet raising across the full length. And I continue to have anxiety about potentially shifting some of that data on the self-rescue left on the table, as presented, I mean, as a consequence of it being more difficult to rescue. So there's definitely a concern there, and I would agree with Councillor Brown about raising the heights. The other thing I wanted to sort of ask was, originally we'd said when we talked about this that we should do it on all of the ends, and that would be fair, but I just wondered whether the officers felt that the data that they've collected in terms of the antisocial behaviour might indicate taking different actions at different parts that are in response to the evidence, rather than automatically assuming the same thing needs to be done everywhere, just whether that had been considered or not.
Yeah, I think that the approach on the salt ash side span is fairly clear cut. So I take it you're talking about whether we do this on on all four corners or just the two corners that we're talking about. The issue on the Plymouth side span is rather different in terms of the way the residents' geography or geometry, if you like, relative to the structure is different. But I think the issues are similar, and although the issues on the Saltash side have been more strongly voiced, I think we still do have the same issue on the Plymouth side. So I think that's the basis for our view that we should be consistent on applying the same treatment to both side spans. I hope that answers the question that you were asking.
Yeah,
thank you. Councillor Buchan, is that it?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dream.
Thank you very much, Chair. I remember we had a couple of workshops looking at this earlier on last year, maybe the previous year as well. And we had welfare professionals come in, as well as the blue light services, talking to us about the various proposals, and their comments stick in my mind really about if we put the height up, it could cause problems trying to get someone back if they're from the other side of the parapet. So for that reason, taking their professional knowledge into consideration, I'm afraid I can't support option 3. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, my laptop's gone. Councillor Dream, thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I share Councillor Buchan, Brown and Drian's anxiety on raising the height and ability to self-recover of the parapets. So I don't feel I'd be able to support either option 2 or 3 looking at raising the parapets. For that reason, it feels that we could invest a considerable sum of money and find that we get exactly the same result or exactly the same experience that we get today. That's I don't think an ideal situation for anybody. There's a thing that really sticks in my mind from the conversations that we've had, is that sort of that victimless crime type thing, that if you can't see what you're doing, it doesn't necessarily matter the same. And I say that probably comes out wrong, but hopefully you understand the idea of improved signage. I think might get people to see that coupled with higher parapets, but it could still happen, and that's where I don't think it would be worthwhile increasing the height of the parapet, and I can't support those. It's worth. There was something that Councillor Holly said, and I don't think he meant to trivialise it, but he talked about artwork, and he kept referring to the artwork improvements. The soft measures is more than just artwork. Artwork is one of those things. In the paper, it talks about the CCT monitoring, that there's trials going on already around sort of the analytics and the software. We've got that. We're going to improve we could look to improve the lighting. We talked about then the intelligence sharing, and then the street furniture review, about making sure things are bolted down, if you like, and that we have appropriate equipment that is well maintained around the bridge. That coupled with the signage, I think at this stage we need to see if that works, rather than spend a considerable sum only to find no change. So I can't support option 2 or 3 of the parapet increases.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dave. One. Councillor Wheeler, sorry, my system temporarily froze. Councillor Wheeler.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I too can't support recommendation 3 that Councillor Holly has moved. I don't think it's been seconded yet. When you come to ask for a seconder, if it isn't seconded, then I'd be happy to move recommendations 1 and 2, that the report be noted and the soft measures be implemented. Like Councillor Brown and Councillor Buchan, my concern about raising the parapets is the potential for a catastrophic unintended consequences. The paragraph, the information on page 53 about the number of self-rescue incidents. If the parapet is raised, I fear that some of those self-rescues would be converted into unintended completions, and that is something I would prefer not to have to contemplate. So I don't support the raising of the parapets at all. I do think that there are measures to be gained. We can make progress, and I think the proposals for soft measures will change the perception of the bridge. I hope they will, and give it a far more positive reputation. So that's my view, Chair. I can't support Councillor Holly's proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Tamlin.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of it's been said already, so I'll try and be brief, but I do agree with what Councillor Davis and Wheeler have said. I have been to visit some of the residents underneath the bridge, and I understand their issues. I'm just very concerned that this won't actually solve the problems. I think we could spend this money, it wouldn't make any difference. It will make some, but I think we're in this case, we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't, to a certain extent. With regards to the third parties and the soft measures, I hope we would work with Safer Saltash even more deeply than we have. They deal with antisocial behaviour in Saltash. Yeah, and I'd just like to see us work with those. Thank you.
Thank you. David, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Charles. Just picking up on something that I think two or three of the councillors mentioned. It's unfortunate that COVID has sort of blunted our learning centre activities, but I'm sure I can reassure members that we're very keen to get up to full swing with learning centre activities, and that in conjunction with this artwork, I think together will help improve the profile of the bridge in the local community. And certainly picking up on what Councillor Tamlin's just said, Safer Saltash, we have had contact with them and certainly be one of the consultees and stakeholders in that exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. I have got one more member wishing to speak, and then I will go back to Councillor Holly. Councillor Lennox Boyd.
Good morning and thank you, Chair. I'd like to second Councillor Holly after speaking to numerous people and the stories that I've heard for how residents have to go through certain situations. On the fact of I was very excited about the 60th anniversary, and on our Safer Saltash, I actually mentioned it to one of the gentlemen from the comp, and he was absolutely said, we want nothing to do with the bridge because of the age of the pupils there, which I was quite astounded, but he didn't seem to want to sort of have any connection with the bridge due to the children. You know, I was really surprised at that, but I am happy to second Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Councillor Lennox Boyd. Councillor Holly, is there anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I listened very carefully and I appreciate where some of the comments are coming from, even though if I don't agree with them. But I do note that there is an awful lot of emphasis on three of the four speakers who mentioned getting people back who are attempting, who either for self-rescue or that sort of thing. And they are concerned mainly, and I understand why, about the person who is making the attempt to commit suicide or thinking of it. My concern comes equally, if not more, from the residents underneath, which is why I didn't mention that. And I can appreciate where they're coming from, but the effect on children and people watching this sort of thing, the people underneath. I mean, one of the families down there, the two kids were in the bed, little girls under 10 in the backyard, and they were screaming because someone was hanging off the edge and saying they're going to jump. They didn't in the end, right above them. this is the sort of thing that I'm concerned about. I'm coming much more from the people underneath the big bridge, the residents, than I am coming from the people who we have a concern for welfare from. It's a sort of unbalanced thing in my opinion. That's just the way it is, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I believe, and democratic support will put me right if I am wrong, that Councillor Holly proposed to the committee that the committee accept option number 3, and that was seconded by Councillor Lennox Boyd. So I think in that circumstance, we need to vote on that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Can I just clarify with Councillor Holly? The full recommendations are on page 46. I'm assuming that your proposal for option 3 also includes numbers 1, 2 and 4. The proposed that the report be noted, the proposed Bridge 60th Anniversary Art Celebration project be endorsed, and then also the ongoing implementation of other measures, you including those in the whole recommendation that you're making with option 3 as your proposal.
Thank you, Irina. I am. Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I'll take a vote on that now, Chairman. When I call your name, please indicate if you are for, against or abstaining. Councillor Brown.
Against.
Councillor Buchan.
Against.
Against. Councillor Coker.
Against.
Councillor Lennox Boyd.
For.
Councillor Davis.
Against.
Councillor Dreen.
Against.
Councillor Holly.
For.
Councillor Leaves.
Against.
Councillor Tamlin.
Against.
Councillor Wheeler.
Against.
So the motion has been lost by 8 votes to 2 with no abstentions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Do I now look for a proposal from the floor for any of the other options? Councillor Dreen.
Chair, I'd like to propose option number 1.
Thank you, Councillor Dreen. Have I got a seconder for option number 1? That seems to be nobody on that one. Oh, Councillor Wheeler, sorry, I missed you.
No, you didn't miss me, Chair. I didn't put my X in until you said there were no seconders. I wanted to move something. I wanted to move options 1, 2 and 4.
Thank you. So at the moment, I've got Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to support Councillor Wheeler's recommendations, but I wonder if Councillor Wheeler would consider an additional recommendation as part of the proposal, which is that the antisocial behaviour becomes a regular reporting item, either in the quarterly general report or as an annual review, so that we can continue to keep abreast of developments and changes, particularly how the softer measures impact on the situation, because I'm very sympathetic to both the residents and to the points that Councillor Holly has made. It's been quite a difficult decision actually to make this morning. And I think it's very important that we just keep mindful of that, so that we have some kind of regular reporting. So if things change, we can, you know, address that and look again at options to remedy anything that comes in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Buchan. I noticed Councillor Wheeler was indicated that he'd like to respond directly to you. So I'm going to give him that opportunity, and then I'm going to bring in Councillor Tamlin.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think that's a very sensible suggestion. Quite happy to incorporate that as presumably recommendation 4, because 4 would replace 3.
Yes.
But I don't have the words, so Councillor Buchan perhaps could produce the words first.
Okay, I'm just going to take Councillor Tamlin, and then we will move to the motion that Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Buchan have proposed. Councillor Tamlin.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get a bit of clarification, really. Councillor Dreen talked about option 3, and I'm presuming he meant as part of recommendation 3. And I just want to understand what's being proposed. Is it recommendations 1, 2 and 4 and nothing for 3? I'm just lost. We're talking about options and recommendations, and I think everybody's getting confused as to what we're talking about. Or I certainly am.
Okay, Councillor Tamlin, I think we will clarify in a second, all right? Councillor Davis.
I think I'm pretty much going to say what Councillor Tamlin was saying, that it feels that at this stage we should note and thank for the options provided in number 3, but at this stage that there are none of those options are moving forward. That would allow the budget to be released, if you like, that we've got allocated, and also give a positive confirmation of what we are doing. And you know, if with Councillor Buchan's addition around the antisocial behaviour, we need to review that again in the future, we can restore a budget line and plan for it accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Wheeler, do you wish to speak again?
Given the uncertainty, Chair, could I just confirm what I intended to move? I intended to move recommendation 1, the report be noted, recommendation 2, the proposed anniversary art celebration be endorsed, recommendation 4 to be renumbered as 3 about the ongoing implementation of other measures set out in paragraphs 2.34 to 240, and Councillor Buchan's recommendation, which she's put in the chat box as recommendation 4, the ASB reporting.
Thank you. That clarifies that. As due process, I need to go back because Councillor Dreen originally made a proposal. Councillor Dreen, do you wish to comment on this?
My apologies, Chair. I completely said the wrong thing there, but I'm more than happy with what's being proposed. That's what I actually meant. So my apologies. That was my mistake.
Okay. So the original motion that you put forward, you're happy to withdraw, and
yes,
we stick with the motion that Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Buchan have put forward. Councillor Davis.
It was only to confirm, are we staying silent on 3 then and just leaving it there effectively in abeyance for some point in the future pick up? I feel like we need to clarify the position around the budget.
Chairman, Liam Musto-Shinton, Senior Corporate Governance Lawyer, I have put some recommended wording in the chat box to replace recommendation 3.
Okay, I would ask all members to read that. I will give a few seconds, and then if anyone wants to come back with any comments, I'm happy to take them. And I look to the proposer and the seconder for their agreement on that.
Sorry, I can't see the words in the chat box that's been proposed.
Okay.
Would you like me to read this out?
Yes, please.
It's being noted that options 1 to 3 set out in the report regarding proposed parapet works are not endorsed, but that, and then following that, Councillor Buchan's words, so but that antisocial behaviour becomes a regular reported item in the General Manager's report with annual evaluation of the efficacy of softer measures implemented.
Thank you for that. I've got Councillor Brown, Councillor Wheeler, and then if Councillor Davis is happy with that clarification, I will then go to the proposer and the seconder. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think that just makes eminent sense on recommendation 3. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So I now return to Councillor Wheeler and Councillor Buchan. do you wish to proceed with your recommendation on your motion as read out to you by the Democratic support? Please indicate with an X in the box.
Chair, I don't understand the following wording. It says, it being noted that options 1 to 3. Now, is that option? What my intention is that recommendation 3 is not proceeded with, but the recommendations 1, 2 and 4 are. So the reference in the suggestion that be noted that options 1 to 3 set out in the report.
Options 1 to 3, Councillor Wheeler, refer to options 1 to 3 regarding the parapet works.
Referring to recommendation 3.
Yes.
Yes.
Could that be made clear? Because I've just completely misunderstood options to be recommendations. So options 1 to 3 included in recommendation 3 set out in the report would be perhaps a bit clearer.
I think Democratic. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to suggest that if it just says it being noted that parapet options 1 to 3, that might provide that clarity.
That would provide clarity, yeah, for me.
Thank you, Councillor Buchan. Right. What I'm now going to do, because Councillor Wheeler, as the proposer, are you happy with that?
Does the proposal include recommendations 1 to endorsement of current recommendations 1, 2 and 4?
Democratic support, I believe it does.
Yes, just for clarity, Chairman, I understand that the original recommendations on page 46, 1, the report be noted, that remains as is. Number 2, the proposed Bridge 60th Anniversary Art Celebration project, that remains as is. Number 3 of the original recommendation is worded as has been read out, that it's noted that the parapet options 1 to 3 set out in the report regarding proposed parapet works are not endorsed. And then number 4 in the original proposal, the ongoing implementation of the other measures set out in the report at paragraphs 2.34 to 2.4 be endorsed to be funded from existing approved budget. So the 3 recommendations remain, and it's the 3rd recommendation that you're basically saying that you don't want any options 1 to 3 proposed aren't being taken forward at this stage. I think that's what everyone is suggesting, Chairman. Please let me know if that's not the case.
Councillor Buchan, you've indicated that you don't agree.
No, thank you. That I do agree, but it was just missed off the additional bit about the reporting on antisocial behaviour as continuing on recommendation 3. I just wanted to make sure that.
Yes, sorry, no, I have got that as well. Yes, that will be included within that. So yeah, that's what I'm taking the vote on in a moment, Chairman. I noted that Andrew Vallance had indicated he wished to speak. I don't know if he's got anything he wants to say before we go to the vote. It was quite.
No. The issue's been cleared up. If the capital budget is deleted, then we have the revenue funding within existing budgets.
Okay, right. So I'm now going to take the proposal as we've discussed, put forward by Councillor Wheeler and seconded by Councillor Buchan, and I'm going to hand that over to Democratic support to take the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. When I call your name, please indicate if you are for, against or abstaining. Councillor Brown.
For.
Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Coker.
For.
Councillor Lennox Boyd.
Against.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Holly.
Against.
Councillor Leaves.
For.
Councillor Tamlin.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
So that has been approved by 8 votes to 2 with no abstentions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. What I am now going to do, the time is now, according to me, 20 past 11. I'm going to declare a 10-minute break so people can refresh themselves or whatever, and I will resume the meeting at 11:30. If that's okay with everyone.
Agreed.
Thank you. So you are 10-minute break. Thank you very much.
before we restart, is everybody else able to see what was in the text chat box just now?
I could, Gary.
Yeah,
I could.
I've had some X's come up with no names, but apart from the text of people putting remarks in there, I've seen those.
Yeah, I think the X with no names, I think, are people from outside of the organisation.
Right. Okay. Thanks for that. Okay.
You're clearly seeing something different from what we're seeing, because I can see the names next to the person as well. So you've got the little letters that you were referring to earlier, Mark, and then the name next to it.
Yeah, some of mine, for example, when David List puts an X in, I'm watching because all I'm getting is just an X.
It's interesting. I got part of the message, the long message, the longest one that was put there by the legal officer, not all of it. Can't win, can you, Mark?
No, this is the first time I've actually chaired this meeting virtually, and it is quite difficult. Anyway, I now make it half.
Would you like me to start doing a roll call to make sure that everyone's
just
back?
going to ask that. Yes, that would be really good. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brown. I think he has probably left actually because he was leaving at 11:30. I'll just check.
He did put in the chat box that he's left.
Yeah, no, he's not here, so that's fine. Councillor Buchan.
Yeah, I'm here.
Councillor Coker.
Here.
Councillor Lennox Boyd.
Here.
Councillor Davis.
Yes.
Councillor Dreen.
Yes, present.
Councillor Holly.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Leaves.
Here.
Councillor Tamlin.
Here.
Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, here.
Yep, the committee's back from the break, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We'll now move to item number 5 in the new running order, which is the General Manager's quarterly report, which are on pages 5 to 45 of your pack. So, David, it's all over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is my routine quarterly report for the period November to January. Ferry operations, there's some narrative there about significant issue on the liner mid-river, which was a very rare occurrence that we have a breakdown mid-river and are immobile. Obviously that was an issue we really had to investigate very quickly. We had a combination of electrical component failures, which we've now identified, and introduced some different monitoring regimes to try to identify early breakdown of these electronic elements. We had to engage very closely with Lloyds and the MCA because it was a significant incident. They were very helpful and the situation was resolved. I have to admit that our reduced traffic levels because of COVID were effectively helped us in that situation, and the 2 ferries were more able to cope with the situation. Traffic levels, as we've heard from the COVID report, been well down, obviously, for the 12 months of that, because that includes a lot of the lockdown. There's some description there about the chain gantries, which I think members need to be aware of. This is paras 2.9 to 2.12. These are the structural frames that suspend the counterweights that keep our ferry chains tensioned. They are old, and I'm trying to remember how old they are. I think they are around 60 years old. They have been maintained but are reaching a state where they almost certainly have to be replaced. So we've introduced a future project for doing that, and we're trying to work out the best way to synchronise that with the forthcoming refits, because obviously that's a big intervention and means we don't have functioning ferry while we do those replacements. So just to draw members' attention to the fact that we are looking at that gantry replacement, and also to say that members have commented, particularly Torpoint members, about the state of the gantries and their appearance. It doesn't make sense to put permanent cladding on the existing gantries if we're about to replace them. So we will soon be installing some more attractive hoarding around the gantries while we keep maintaining them until such time as we do a permanent replacement synchronized with the forthcoming refits, the next one of which is in 23, sorry. Bridge operations, traffic lane availability a bit below target. We've been finishing off the curb replacement works, which obviously affects traffic lanes. That's now complete, but net of curb works, we were above peak time target. And again, off peak also a bit below target, as was overall. But that's largely due to the curb works, which we try to do off peak, and some routine salt ash tunnel maintenance. Toll lanes somewhat affected by the toll upgrade project, but that's largely complete now, so hopefully we can resume normal service. KPIs are in Appendix 3, and members may have seen. Traffic levels not dissimilar to the bridge, to the ferries, and we've reported those elsewhere. So curb works complete, which is good news. A long project and obviously intrusive in terms of traffic lanes. So we're very pleased that that is over in time for the traffic recovery. But unfortunately, the next paragraphs 225, 227 set out the bridge deck resurfacing project, which is even more intrusive on our traffic lanes. We expect the traffic management on that to start mid-April. Contractors appointed, and Richard Cole was involved in the early meetings on the project now with that contractor. Traffic management will be critical for that project to make sure that we maximise the value we can get from the available traffic lanes. Tricia has been working a lot on some comprehensive comms and PR on that, and we'll be circulating that to members in advance of it going into the public domain. We expect to be doing that near the end of this month, 2 or 3 weeks in advance of the works happening, and once we know a bit more detail from the contractor, but members should expect to receive some drafts of that press release in the near future. Learning Centre has been affected and is still affected by COVID, but we are racking up some school bookings, which is good news, and working hard in preparation for release from this third lockdown. We've mentioned the 60th anniversary of the bridge earlier in the report on the antisocial behaviour, and we're proposing to have a series of events and projects related to that anniversary in October. I've got a question come up, so I don't know if Chairman want me to break and answer that now. You're on mute, Chairman, I'm afraid.
Yes, Councillor Holly, if you have a question.
Yeah, it is a quick one, I hope. This is about the bridge deck resurfacing project. Will it have actually started? Will the lanes be closed by June? I asked that because it's taken me about 3 or 4 years to get an agreement with Cornwall Council to resurface the whole of 4th Street and remake the humps in 4th Street and do a side road at the same time. And it's going to be difficult there for 3 or 4 days. Will the work have started on the lanes by June?
It will have started by June.
Right. I don't know what the effect will be, the cumulative effect of the two. Could you perhaps ask, consult with your colleagues? I don't know if Rick's here today. Is Rick here? Is Rick here? No.
I believe Rick is here, but Richard and I will liaise with.
Thank you very much. If you could
to understand their works and the interaction between those. Rick's just maybe Rick wants. Richard, sorry, I thought it was Rick Clayton. It's Richard Cole.
Same initials.
Okay. If you do. The other thing is, could you, David, if I can arrange it with the mayor, could you join in a virtual thing, perhaps at the beginning of the Saltash Town Council meeting, just to explain the situation, why it's necessary, etc., etc.
Yeah,
I've been doing as much as I can with everyone I've come across about the need and about the technical difficulties and all the rest of it. But if you could do it, that'd be great.
They're obviously a key stakeholder, so we welcome that opportunity. Yes.
Thank you. I'll liaise with them. Thank you.
Richard, did you anything to add on what I said?
I was just only going to we've been liaising with Tony Jasper, who's their Streetworks coordinator. So he's aware of our works within Cornwall Council. So we'll continue to do that liaison with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. If we're taking questions as we go along, that's great. I just have a small one on the bridge. David, I've noticed, I will say in recent months, because obviously with lockdowns, it hasn't exactly been a regular excursion for me across the bridge. But I have noticed that a number of the studs are not lighting. As part of the resurfacing, are these going to be replaced and repaired?
Yes, we'll have to replace the studs in conjunction with the surfacing project. So there'll be a period when we have no studs, because we have to complete runs of traffic lane before we can put the studs in. So they'll be replaced at the late stage of the project.
David, it's up to you if you'd like to continue with your report.
Thank you, Chair. We're on the Learning Centre, the fact we're getting bookings and the series of projects, and we'll bring to the June meeting a proposed programme of activities related to the 60th anniversary. And hopefully by then we'll know a bit more about how inclusive and sociable we can be about those events. COVID-19, obviously we've discussed in detail. The office is open for a period, but still closed. But hopefully there'll be a time quite soon when we'll be able to go back to more normal service. Toll Refresh project is in a sort of snagging stage, if you like, at the moment, and some back office work, and we still need to get in place our traffic counting arrangements, which are part of that project, which will give us traffic data in both directions, which is something we haven't got at the moment, which will be really useful. Toll revenue, again, we've discussed that in detail in the future finance and COVID effect report. Health and safety, not a particularly problematic period. Some 6 accidents, but none of them reportable under the RIDOR arrangements. The incident involving a customer at the toll booths was minor, and no reported long-term effects of that. Mark Meredith is on the call, but I understand the motorcyclist rode away. So it was, as members will know, the barriers are designed to pop out of position under very light loading, and therefore they are proven to be very low risk. Environmentally, continuing to monitor our waste. As we've discussed before, the seaweed removal is a big influence on our numbers. Electricity and gas consumption is an Appendix 2. We're still trying to refine the usage in the offices. We've identified some areas which are already showing some improvements. The bridge street lighting we've mentioned before are being costed at the moment with using LED. A few positive things about energy usage for transport. Our pool e-bike scheme will be fully up and running in spring. We have, I think, Richard will correct me maybe, but I think we have 6 e-bikes that are available for staff to use for their travel. Vehicle charging points at the bridge are now in use, and we've changed we're about to change one of our diesel vans for a full electric in the next month or so.
Okay.
Sorry, yes.
David, could I just, I've just had a message from Councillor Dreen that he's been kicked out of the meeting. Could Democratic support confirm whether Councillor Dreen is now is now back, I believe. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. I lost connection there in the middle of the report. I'm back again.
Thank you, Councillor Drain. Welcome back. Right, David, I've got some questions for you. I don't know if you'd finished that section.
Any time is fine.
Okay, Councillor Holly.
Thank you. David, the electric car charging points for the public, are we charging them for that?
Yes, we're charging them. We've looked at Plymouth City Council and Cornwall Council policy, and we're charging in a similar way to them.
Okay, has that been taken up by the public?
I can't give you the numbers. I have seen a private car at them. I don't know if Meredith can give us anything, or maybe I think I don't know if Richard's team are involved in that at all.
I can say it's been used by 2 members of the public.
Okay, thank you. That's
Sure.
good, actually.
Yeah.
If it's being used by officers, etc., that's really good. Can you just give me some more information on the e-bike? Are there sort of 3 being at each end, and officers are encouraged to use them? And have they been taken up, these offers?
We've been trialling their use for a while now. It's adopted so far by what you call the keen cyclists, I suppose, using them as an alternative, and we're trying to push it out to the more casual cyclist or even the non-cyclist. They are currently housed at the bridge office because our facilities there to store them are better, but we're looking at arrangements at the ferry and where we can put suitable storage space at the ferry.
The other thank you for that, David. The other I think it's a really good idea to try. Thank you for trying it. And the other one is, it says at the bottom of it, encourage cycle commuting from home to work. So would the e-bikes be used for that as well?
Yes. Have been used by myself and by Richard Cole already. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions on the environment, please, David. First of all, great news on the electric vehicle. That's really good. A suggestion on the reporting where you've got the chart for the electric and gas consumption. Could we please have that be 12 months? And if possible, could you put on a line for a previous year just so we can actually visually compare how that's going? That would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
And then I have 2 questions. One is how the wood is processed that's come from the gantry work, and the other is we've got somewhere. I'm going down my comments and not the sheet. So somewhere in the report we've got about promoting low carbon as part. I think it might even be in the pay policy, but low carbon as part of the travel choices and trying to kind of encourage that. And I just wondered if we are helping staff in doing that, or is there an assumption that one mode of transport is always going to be better than a different mode of transport in any circumstances, or is there something to assist staff in making those judgments about reducing their carbon emission from their business travel? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so yes, on the gas and electric, we'll take on board your comments on that. So you're talking about the wood we're stripping off the old gantries, I take it. Yeah. I think I heard a faint yes in the background there. So that wood will be handled appropriately, but it has had treatment to it. So I'll defer to Dawood about how that wood is handled when we dispose of it, depending on what treatment it's had in terms of preservation. That may limit what it can be, what we can do with it. In terms of our business travel, our travel policy has some quite clear process on how journeys are taken and focusing on use of public transport and reducing carbon footprint. So that's been in our travel policy for about 4 or 5 years. I think Andrew wrote it. Andrew may be able to correct me on the time.
4 or 5 years from memory, yes.
Thanks. So hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor Buchan.
Okay, Richard, you've got your hand up. Richard Cole's put an X. Is that an old one?
Yes, Chair, that was an old one.
Okay, I'll move to Councillor Tamlin and then back to David List.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a very quick question about the vehicle charging points. I understand that they're fast charging points, but they might not be the fastest ones available. And I was just wondering, to put more in, would we be looking to put in faster ones? Because obviously at the moment they take a little while to charge up. So it may be that they could.
So I think I lost some of that just at the end of your.
Sorry, I think I'm breaking up a little bit. Yeah, the charging points, I understand they're fast charging points, but they're not the fastest available. And I'm just wondering that if we have more, could we look at having the fastest ones in? Because at the moment the public are there, it is almost like a fuel station in a way for them. So if they take 20 minutes or, you know, instead of an hour or something like that, it may make a difference on how people use them.
Yeah, you're right. They are the fast charging points and not the super fast, which I think there are not that many in the country at the moment. But
Sure.
We've already allocated 2 of our parking spaces in the Bridge car park to that, and I think the trend will be to have more over time, and we'll take a view on the contemporary practice and what the 2 parent authorities are doing, and take that on board when we review any future installations. So I think this will be an increasingly important part of our reporting. So I think we'll come back to members about any proposals for more charging points when that arises.
Okay, thank you, David.
Thank you. I'm going to take a question from Councillor Holly, and then I'm going to ask David to proceed with his report. Councillor Holly.
Thank you, David. On the charging points, the last time I came to the Bridge offices, there is a car parked in one of the charging points and obviously not using the charging point. Has that been a problem? Have you noticed it?
As far as I'm aware, it hasn't been a problem because the usage isn't very high. I'm not aware of anybody complaining they couldn't get access, but we do police the car park, and our light recovery driver regularly patrols the car park, and so we would hope to pick anybody up who's doing that. And it's a bit surprising really, because during the COVID pandemic, our parking hasn't really been stretched usually. I don't know if Mark Meredith wants to comment on that for me.
Hi, it's Mark here. Yes, as David said, we do police the car parks. It's been very, very rare we've had somebody in it. And I think with the one time I've known it, someone was just actually putting their charging cable back in. So normally those 2 charging bays are free, and obviously staff are communicated that they shouldn't use them at all unless, of course, they're charging their vehicle. So yeah, generally it's the 2 spaces have been solely for the use of electric vehicles.
Thank you, Mark. I must admit, at the time I was really tempted to park there myself because there's nowhere else at all to park. So, David, the question on the monitoring indicators, do you want that later?
Is it for this report or for the business plan?
No, for this report. It's one of the appendices.
I'll take it now if we haven't already covered the issue.
Remember, I did ask, I can't remember if it was you, Andrew or Richard, whether we could break down the complaints just roughly so that we know what sort of areas people are complaining about. We do that in the future for us.
Yeah, I mean we've invited members to comment on the KPIs that we report on as part of the business plan. So, and I think we'll come on to that in the later report. Maybe we can address that in the report coming later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you, Chair. I'll go back to the report, and staff absence continues to be low, 8.7 days per employee, and that's split almost 50-50 between long-term and short-term sickness. So that is actually a trend which has been very positive through the pandemic. Pay policy, there is an Appendix 6, which is our updated pay policy. It is virtually identical to the previous version. but as set out in para 266, the only notable difference is the updated foundation living wage, which applies from the 1st of April 2021. Journey time monitoring, we are now adding in another journey, if you like, route. But because of our extra sensors, we're now adding in the time for the St Budo Junction to Carkeel roundabout journey, giving an extended zone, which is around the 5-minute mark. And this may be another, possibly arguably more meaningful number for people to look at. Our bridge structure numbers are, between 1 and 2 minutes, and it's a very limited journey. I suppose the downside of looking at the extended zone is some of the delays on that may not be down to us. They may be on the A38 between the bridge of St Budo, or the A38 between the tunnel and Carkeel. But I'm pleased that we can now add in this journey, and also at the ferry we'll be adding in next report a longer route for the ferry crossing, going back up the A374 in both directions. Here, challenge action plan, progress has been limited because of the largely because of the pandemic, but we'll be able to make more progress with that in the coming months. And in association with that, officers are doing a review of our governance, and that will be coming to the June meeting. Comms and engagement have been busy, obviously, through this period, responding to changes in the government guidelines and lockdowns and our projects. So Tricia's been very busy on that. I've already discussed the resurfacing comms, and the 60th anniversary will also be a big feature of that in the coming months. And we're carrying on with our regular staff messages. Because of COVID, that's also stimulated some staff messaging, which I think has been very well received, and we're carrying on with that. So I think that's the end of my report summary. So over to you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Yes, there are. Crikey. Gary Davis first.
So apologies, David. I was planning on doing questions at the end, or I thought I'd do questions at the end, and then when people started at the beginning interrupting, I'd like to take you back to the beginning of the report, if I may, where you talked about the Torpoint Ferry. So thank you for the report. As usual, very comprehensive. It was good to hear about the remedial action on the gantries. And as you sort of highlighted, some of them I'm keen to see that we do improve the way that they appear. So any work we can do in the meantime is appreciated. I noticed in the stats under 2.2 around the ferry availability, the 3 ferry peak service, if you like, stat hasn't appeared in there. I don't know if we can get that. I know we've had some discussions in that, and it certainly is useful to certainly to the town council, if you like, for them to see that as well, just to understand whether there's an issue getting ferries fired up and how many may be missed. So if we can restore that back to the report in future, that would be good, please. Then the only other bit was on the breakdown. Well done to everybody involved in getting the breakdown resolved. That, in my, dare I say, layman, uneducated view, perhaps it seemed quite effective that we had a breakdown. We got an engineering team out onto the vessel, and then we got it towed back across in a relatively short period of time. And I say that 2 hours isn't a short period of time if you're on the vessel. What concerns me is if there was an emergency case on the ferry of some sort, 2 hours is quite a long time. I wondered if have we reviewed that situation to understand whether 2 hours is a good period of time, and what we might need to put in place if there was an emergency.
Can I, before you answer that, can I just ask members that are not participating and officers to make sure that they are on mute, because all the way through Councillor Davis's questions we could hear people talking. Thank you very much. David, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, apologies, Councillor Davis, about the 3 ferry service. I blame myself for that. Paul Davey retired at the end of last year. Paul used to generate all these numbers, and his colleagues, I didn't prompt them to do that. So that is down to me, and we'll circulate that within the next few days so that you've got that information. Then with regard to the response to the breakdown, I mean, if we had an incident in the middle of the river, then the nature of the incident, I suppose, would possibly give it higher priority to the tug to get something to happen with the ferry, but also we would get emergency services onto the vessel as well. We've got a emergency response plan, which includes doing things while the ferry is static, but obviously getting it to one side is also critical. We get a good response from MOD to get people onto the ferry. They're very good at helping us with support, and we get good response once we've decided we need a tug. I think part of the 2 hours was we were hoping to resolve it with our own staff when they got on board. That took about half an hour to establish that wasn't going to happen. Then we have to request the tug. Well, the tug was prompted already, but then we actually had to mobilise the tug. One of the downsides of chain ferries, as members know, is they're hard to move around once something goes wrong. There are lots of positives, as we know. So yeah, you very valid point. We had a big exercise, a sort of hot wash up, if you like, after the incident to work out what we could learn from it. Dawood and the ferry technical manager and ferry operations manager heavily involved in that, and we've taken on board some of the learning we had from that, but I don't think there are any major changes we would make to our response plan. Dawood, anything to add on that? Dawood may have left the meeting because he was assuming the original order of the meeting, and may have, I think, another obligation at the moment. So if Councillor Davis would like, I'll send him an update on the learning that we gained from that incident. But I think in fairness, I think our response was pretty good, and obviously there were some disgruntled customers. I'm touching some wood here, but it is very rare that we get a mid-river breakdown that we cannot keep moving. They are every few to several years, in my experience.
Thank you, David.
I think that's your questions, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, David. If you wouldn't mind, just dropping me a note on those key learnings. I know the town council are keen to understand that as well. So as I say, I do. It does feel, from my point of view, it felt like a good recovery. 2 hours seemed good, knowing everything that may have gone involved. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor David. Andrew Valence, did you want to come in on that particular point for Councillor Davis?
Not on that particular point, but rather on the earlier point made by Councillor Holly. He did contact me in mid-February, and I did advise him that I would get those complaint statistics to members in a day or two before the meeting, I'm afraid. It's rather a matter of my communication to my team to prepare those stats for me, and I will distribute those in the next few days.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, then Councillor Buchan.
Thanks, Chair. Mine is just a detail on the pay policy on page 38. The last paragraph reads, regardless of pay grade, employees recalled to work who meet the conditions above will receive a minimum of 4 hours pay at the appropriate hourly rate. Does regardless of pay grade include senior management as well as anyone else?
It does, Councillor, yes.
Thank you.
That is relatively rare because the call-outs are generally at senior technical level and technical level, but may involve IT on a Sunday night. That's, or possibly engineering. If we've had an impact on the bridge, we may need a professional person there to make a judgment call at the middle of the weekend. And so we think that's the reasonable approach.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whelan. I've got Councillor Buchan and then Councillor Dreen, and then we will move to the recommendations unless anyone else indicates during Councillor Buchan speaking. Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick one. On page 39, there's a point around first aiders and a first aider payment. I just wondered whether there's a cost to the first aid certificate and whether or not we cover staff in that training for that cost.
Yeah, we cover the training and any costs of getting the training. We actually, it's a very topical question because we're just reviewing our first aid arrangements at the moment, and Dawood has been through the organisation with a review of how many we need in which location. So that is actually something that's under review. So you may or may not see a change in that in the next 12 months or so.
Thank you. Councillor Dreen.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just a quick to say thank you to David for the communications we get from Trish and the team. Whenever there's any incidents or anything going wrong or something comes up, we're emailed straight away as members. So I just wanted to say if you could possibly take that back and thank them for the information, especially at some of the late times when the information comes out. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dreen. I fully endorse what you said there. Councillor Lennox Boyd.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Mine is a question going back to the resurfacing project. Will a lot of this work be done at night?
Very little will be done at night because of the nature of the work, the environmental conditions that are needed, and the noise involved in some of the activities. So there are quite a few reasons why not much of that work can be done at night. There may be some scope for some preparatory work to be done. Obviously, we're trying to limit the intrusion into our normal service delivery. But on the other hand, quality is absolutely key in this work because as members will know, and you may not know because of your more recent involvement with us, but the surfacing on the bridge deck is very specific. It has to be very high quality. It has to stick very well to the bridge deck to help itself and also the bridge deck to last longer. So the last thing we want is quality issues because repairing is obviously very intrusive as well. So very limited amount of work could be done at night. I don't know, Richard Cole is more in touch with the detail, and I'm not sure if this contractor has been offered the window to do anything at night. Richard, could you possibly help us on that?
I would just say the working hours are limited to reasonably normal working hours. If they want to work an evening shift, they can apply to us for that, and we'll consider it on a case-by-case basis. As David's alluded to, we have some very close neighbours. The operations are very noisy. Removing material from a steel bridge deck tends to echo quite significantly around the river on both sides, so we will cause some significant disruptions. But certainly if the contractor wants to work some evening shifts, particularly while the lights are lighter, they have that opportunity should they wish. They will be working weekends as well, so a lot of the working methods are developed to minimise delays, but also enhance the quality where we need to.
That's lovely, thank you. But we need the communications to the residents, really, don't we? You know that this is the specific, so it has to be sort of worked. The actual system, because we need to tell the residents why, because we always get the same thing. Oh, why are you doing it in the summer? Do you know what I mean? They need the real specifications as to why this is really important.
I think, sorry, Richard. I think we've done a comprehensive communications plan, which
lovely.
I think 4 or 5 officers have been involved in. Richard and Tricia between them have done a frequently asked questions suite, if you like, to go with that. So you'll be seeing that in the next probably week, 10 days, you'll be seeing a draft of that before we actually go public with it. But thank you very much for raising those points, and I'm hopefully we've addressed them. When we circulate this to members, if there's any frequently asked questions that you think we've missed, yeah, we'd welcome those. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Thank you, David and Richard. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we now move to the recommendations on page 5, and I will hand over to our democratic control officers to take the vote on this.
Sorry, Chairman, did somebody actually propose and second the recommendation?
You're probably correct. Well, I'm happy to propose.
Thank you.
And have we got a seconder, please? We have indeed from numerous people. So the first one that I can see is Councillor Dream.
Okay, I'll take the vote. Councillor Buchan.
4.
Councillor Coker.
4.
Councillor Lennox-Boyd.
4.
Councillor Davis.
4.
Councillor Dreen.
4.
Councillor Holly.
4.
Councillor Leaves.
4.
Councillor Tamlin.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
Thank you, that's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We now move to item number 7, the joint undertaking. We start with 7.1, which is the 2021 budget monitoring report on pages 82 to 89 of your report, and I will ask the relevant officer to introduce this.
So this is the January report based on the January data for the period 2021. So going down through, the current revenue position for the Tamar Bridge is got an overall deficit of just over £0.9 million to date. And within capital, we're showing expenditure to date of just over 5.1 million against a forecast of 7.2 million. Within the estimates, we've updated the reserve position to the end of March based on the current lockdown free position with the current traffic flows. So from the previous reported position of 2.1, we've done that's now going to be reduced onto just over £2 million. Moving to the revenue section, overall within the bridge, we've currently got a favourable variance of just over 400,000. Within our ferry budget, we've got a favourable variance of just over 156,000. Within the corporate cost centre, we've got a adverse variance of just under 140,000. And obviously this year with the effects of COVID, we've currently got an adverse variance on income of just over 1.3 million.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, a couple of questions on page 83. In paragraph 1.5, have we when do we expect final settlement of the government grant, please?
Okay, so basically the first tranche we had for the period April through to July has been received. The next one we've submitted to the end of November is due in the next week or two. And then we will be looking to do the next return for the period December through to March during April. So so they're due in, but we have been chasing as well from our side.
Okay, thanks. And there's no reason to suppose that what we're going to get is going to be anything different from what we expect.
No, and basically they've paid the first tranche. We're expecting the second tranche imminently, and basically based on our forecast, it's going to be at the £3.4 million mark for this year, based on our current forecast.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And obviously that's through to the end of June as well. So obviously at the moment we've got that confirmation.
Right, and of course we have no idea what's going to happen at the end of June, but we have no idea what our traffic volumes are going to be either. So there we go. further down the page in paragraph 2.2, bridge painting, favourable variance of 100,000, well, 125,000. Is the reduced work programme postponing work into the next year, or is it actually work that isn't required, please?
I'll have to bring Andrew onto that one.
Thank you.
Really, I'd have to defer to Richard Cole on the programme. But in general terms, we make a provision on what we anticipate in terms of maintenance painting before years start, and then Richard and his team review the arrangements on a month by month basis. So it is possible there will be some variation on that, but for more detail, I'm afraid I have to defer to Richard.
Thanks. I think Andrew summed that up. It's also worth noting that it's winter, or has been winter time, which tends to slow down our painting progress as well. So that money will essentially be spent in the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you, Chair. And last one, the last paragraph on that page, supplies and services showing favourable variance relating to the profiling of a number of ICT and other maintenance and lease contracts. I was just wondering why we don't get the profiling closer to the actuals.
Valid point, Councillor Wheeler. I think from our discussions nearer the start of last year, you would have and workshops, you would have seen how many budget lines we have, and you're quite right. Some of the detail we haven't got through, particularly when we talk about ICT. Those are annual maintenance contracts and the like that come up towards the end of the financial year. And that's work that predominantly me and my team have to go through with the individual managers and get that profiling a bit tighter. Thank you.
Okay, and it's not too material anyway. It'll work out at the end of the year anyway. So that's okay. That's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. Any other questions? I will give a few seconds to see if anyone indicates that they wish to speak. Know that they don't. So on page 82, the recommendation is that the revenue forecast and capital programme for 2020-21 be noted. Have I got a second?
Chairman, we just need to note the report. There's no requirement to take a vote on it because it's purely for information, so you can move on to the next item if you wish.
That's good, thank you. We do it slightly different in Plymouth, so okay, that's cool. So we will now move on to the next item, which is 7.2, the business plan. So I will hand over to whoever's leading on that, which looks like Andrew.
Indeed, thank you, Chair. This report seeks approval of the 21-22 annual business plan, so the business plan for the forthcoming year. The document is the final annual plan within our 4-year strategic plan cycle, which began in 2018, and it follows a similar format to its predecessors. Officers will be bringing a draft of the replacement strategic plan to the September meeting, with the plan for further business plans scheduled for presentation to December meetings to align with budget approval rather than to the meeting following budget approval. The document will be familiar to members, or certainly the format will be. And the variable elements include the action plan within that document, which incorporates projects approved with the budgets at the previous December meeting. A number of actions as well have been carried forward from the current year due to the limitations on resources and business activity due to the pandemic. It does take forward some member-led recommendations, for example, in relation to the peer challenge and on supporting funding from the DFT, and there are a number of standing actions within that action plan as well. Within the performance targets section, the KPIs have been lightly refreshed with some additional monitoring elements added. It is intended that these additions become targeted KPIs in future years once a baseline is being measured and data is available to establish appropriately challenging targets. Members will note that the journey time KPI targets remain to be confirmed. This reflects David's commentary earlier about the extension of the monitoring fields to approach roads, particularly since the bridge ones have been implemented at a time when traffic patterns are impacted by the current travel restrictions, and it's very difficult at the moment to establish that challenging target. So I'm happy to take member questions on the report, and thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have an indication that Councillor Holly would like to speak.
Thank you, Mark. Andrew, thank you for this report. On page 104, the table 2 reliable services, the bridge lane availability, do you think it's worth putting a note there underneath it before this is finally published to say that, you know, this is subject to the disruption caused by the resurfacing, which will have a major effect on bridge lane availability, just to cover ourselves?
I can put an explanatory note, but we have had the discussions prior to this about whether we modify the targets or not. Lane availability was obviously affected by the curbs project as well. So while we were planning that project, we discussed whether we reduce the target or express the effect of the target within our reports, and we've chosen the latter approach. So I'm certainly willing to add a little bit of commentary to that.
Okay, David, did you want to come in on that point?
Just on that point, I think it's a very valid point that Councillor has made there, and members may remember when we had only 2 ferry service after we had some issues with the chain gantries middle of 2020, we were reporting availability of how we were delivering the service that we were actually able to deliver, and as a separate number. So I think what we'll do during this project is report of the lanes we have available because of the project, what percentage of that are we delivering. So I think we'll have an extra number in there, certainly for the duration of that resurfacing project.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buchan.
Thank you, Chair. So I have a number of suggestions around the KPIs, and my apologies to everybody for personal circumstances being I haven't got this to you before the report was written. I am finishing my PhD and it's taken a lot of my time up. But I have shared these with some of the officers, and would it be appropriate, Chair, for me to just run through where I think we could potentially change or add to the KPIs, and then people can, I guess, comment or discuss if they vigorously disagree? Will that work, Chair?
I'm seeking advice from the management here, if that's the correct way to proceed.
If I can just reply in general terms, that Councillor Buchan's giving a list of or a number of suggestions. I think for the most part, I'm quite happy to report those in the coming year, but again, it's the case that if we start to measure something, we need to establish that baseline. So effectively, I think from the June meeting onwards, I think as a management team we can report those within the GM report. Whether they're incorporated into this business plan is perhaps a different question. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Buchan.
if I'll divide it into two bits then. One which is where I think the KPIs should be changed specifically, and then one where a sort of section of suggestions which perhaps the committee might want to consider whether they want to have that either as reporting or as KPIs. I suppose it might be that there could be a recommendation that we alter the KPIs in accordance with the discussion or something like that if it came down to it. So I'll try and whiz through them. So the first one is around the journey waiting times and travel times, which I would love to see what the data is in long term, because I suspect that the averages that we use rarely deviate over the grand scheme of things, and the devil is in the detail. So I think it would be useful to look at a new performance indicator there that would be either looking at deviations within a specific time slot so that you could pick out, rather than one grand average, you could pick out specific issues, or to look whether there's a sort of long-term trend. So some thinking on that, because it seems to me that that's not a very useful indicator that we get reported on that. On the staff, we've mentioned it before on sickness. I think that KPI needs to be broken down into, or the reporting needs to be broken down into short and long term, because a single average doesn't really do justice to what's going on there. I also wondered if on the business journeys, we might want to consider having a target around the proportion of business journeys that use low carbon or car sharing. This year is probably not a very good year to be developing a baseline on that sort of thing, but just for consideration. On the waste, I think we should be separating out the seaweed, because I don't think we can really, just as a separate measure, it's useful to know what's happening to the seaweed, but it's not a waste that we're generating per se. It's different from the waste that we're generating. We seem to be exceeding our target on recycled waste, so I think we need to increase the target percentage. I think it's 40%, is it? So it should go up to 45 or 50, and I would like to put that as certainly that as a recommendation, that we change that target. And I also wanted to query about that we have diversion from landfill as a target, because my understanding is they don't really send anything to landfill. So we would be better focusing on specifically on the proportion to be recycled, I think. And then some sort of suggestions around future performance indicators or reporting. One is the environmental management system. I'll be interested to know how that will be reported to us, and whether we'll be using that to set more environmental targets. Also a query of whether we have targets for the learning centre. Perhaps we have targets that were built into the funding bid that we report on, whether these should be incorporated in reporting back to us to make sure that that project's on track as well. And the monitoring of complaints. So we get a number of how many complaints are received, but I feel it would be much better if that number was broken down into some categories. For example, complaints that a journey time took a long time, perhaps when we've got roadworks, is very different from a complaint that there was some problem with customer services, for example. Some things we can do some things about and some things we can't. So if we were to break down the complaint reporting into categories, then we could set some goals around how to reduce complaints in certain areas. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, David List, you've got your hand up, so I presume you want to comment on some of these. David, are you there?
I was enjoying being mute and not on camera. Sorry, Chair. On the long and short-term sick, I don't think that's an issue at all. That's a straightforward one that we already report in the narrative in the GM report. So I will ask Andrew to include those in this reporting. I think the other ones are a bit more complicated. Journey times, as Councillor Buchan has said, we don't see a lot of variation, and the way to extract the anomalies is difficult to make them meaningful to the lay person, and to be honest, even those who are used to numbers but not statistically as astute as perhaps Councillor Buchan might be. So putting things like standard deviation and things in aren't necessarily that meaningful. The other problem with journey times is that anything like the curb works changes the numbers significantly. Anything like a ferry out of service changes the numbers significantly. So I think it's very good that it's very good suggestion that we look at this more carefully and see if we can extract some meaningful variances. But I think I do support Andrew in suggesting that we have a go at that this year and try to I suggest maybe that officers could come up with some different KPIs and use them and see what they reflect and if they are useful or not before we introduce them into the formal business plan. The environment one, I think Councillor Buchan's point is valid, and we've noted the effect of the seaweed influence on the numbers already. And I think I'll speak to Dawood about changing the percentage there. And if members have got, I don't think this meeting is the right place to debate individual KPIs and vote on them. Otherwise, we'll be here till next Friday. But maybe we can have a look at that ourselves and propose a change. And maybe circulate that on the recycled waste one, circulate it to members. And on the complaints, I think we will, could I suggest that we look at our complaints set and see if we can, I think Councillor Buchan's picked out a couple of key ones there. Journey time delays, a classic one, and maybe the website couldn't update my tag account. There'll be 3 or 4 things which capture probably 90% of our complaints, and I think we could come up with those, and we'll circulate that. And I propose that we circulate that before the next meeting and say we're going to look at those and we'll report them for June and September, and then by September maybe have a feel for what we actually want to formally include.
David,
he's on mute at the moment, like I.
David, I've undertaken anyway to circulate some detail of the current year's complaints to members in the next week or so. So I think that'll help inform or provide some context for members on the complaints issue, certainly.
Okay, I'm going to hand that back as no one else is indicating yet to speak. So I'm going to hand this back to Councillor Buchan.
I'm very happy with most of what David said. I'm very happy to trial some things and see how they work out and devise them. I'm very keen that is, well, I would like to move the recommendations on the report, please, Chair, and I would like to add a third recommendation that we do this, that we review the KPIs proactively to work out better ways to report some of the aspects. And I appreciate what David said. I feel like I keep raising this at every meeting, so I'm very keen that we bake it as a specific action that we then do go away and do, because I think it will really improve what we're doing. But I do disagree about the recycling rates, because I think we need to push harder on that. And I would like to add a fourth recommendation, which is that we increase the target, I think, to 45. Is it 40% currently? If it's 40% currently, I think we should increase to 45%.
Okay, thank you. I've noted your recommendations, or I'm sure Democratic support have noted your recommendations, Councillor Buchan. Before I ask for any other comments or a seconder, I'm going to invite David, has indicated that he would like to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I know some members may shudder when I say the word workshop, but it may be appropriate that other than whatever the members decide today, obviously we'll implement, but the other things that we're going to monitor, I think may justify a workshop discussion on this, because some of them are quite detailed and there isn't always an obvious choice to make. So I think, obviously there may be some new membership of the committee as well in June, so it may be appropriate. The first headline item when members come back from the elections is going to be COVID and finances, but I think maybe there'll be some room for a part of a workshop or a workshop on this as well in the summer.
Okay, thank you very much. I have got Councillor Buchan's motions. Is there anyone that would wish to either comment or second Councillor Buchan's amendments. Okay, let me change that then. So, Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where I stand on this. I think we do need to have a look at the KPIs, but equally we need to get them right. So I think probably recommendation instead of the two that Councillor Buchan's suggested, we might say that we would review the KPIs, in particular the recycling rates, through a workshop to be held in the summer, or something like that.
Okay,
I wonder if Councillor Buchan would find that acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Wheeler. I'm going to hand that to Councillor Buchan for comment.
As determined resistance to push forward on recycling rates, I'd be happy for those 2 points condensed into a single third recommendation around reviewing in a workshop.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchan. No one else has indicated any, so I'm going to ask the Democratic support to read out now what the recommendations are, and then get an agreement from Councillor Buchan and Councillor Wheeler, and then we will put that to the vote.
Okay, so the recommendation was to approve the business plan, so that is the first part of the recommendation, and then also that the KPIs be reviewed to work out better reporting, including, I mean, it was initially suggested that the target be set at 45% for recycling targets, but that seems to have been incorporated within a general review of KPIs to be undertaken via a workshop, and then specifically to look at the recycling targets within that workshop. That's what I understand the proposal is, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Could Councillor Buchan and Councillor Wheeler indicate support for that by putting an X in the chat box, please? Councillor Buchan has said yes, and so has Councillor Wheeler. So as the proposer and the seconder, I will hand over to Democratic support.
Okay, please indicate how you wish to vote. Councillor Buchan.
For.
Councillor Coker.
For.
Councillor Lennox-Boyd.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dreen.
For.
Councillor Holly.
For.
Councillor Lees.
For.
Councillor Tamlin.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Thank you, that's unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And now we move to item number 9, the gender pay gap reporting, which is on page 126 to 132 of your reports. And I will hand over, I believe, to Andrew Valence for this one.
Thank you again, Chair. This is the second of today's reports that follows a very similar format to items members have seen before. Firstly, I'll remind members that last year, central government removed the requirement to report on this issue. This means that within this report, this is the first public outing of the previous year's figures, as well as the current year's. In relation to the current year, HMG also, rather late in the day, pushed back the reporting deadlines to the autumn, but that came after this report was drafted, and we've taken the view that we made sufficient progress and put sufficient effort into producing this report that it will go forward at the planned time. Members should also note that the snapshot of pay rates is taken from the previous year, the prior year. So what is reported as the current pay gap is actually based on payroll figures from early 2020 rather than this year. I also remind members that it's arguable whether there is a statutory requirement for the undertaking to report, given that the number employed is significantly below the 250 employee threshold where reporting becomes mandatory under statute. However, we continue to take the view that publication of the gap aligns with the general principle of public organisation transparency, and we will be adding the report to our website by the end of this month. When we get down to the figures, the size of the cohort involved, a little over 100 employees, does mean that relatively minor changes in profile can cause quite notable movements in the figures being reported, and has been stated in previous years, albeit for other reasons, those headline results have to be seen in context. So despite the positive movement seen in the reduced gap, the factors for that improvement include things such as the pay award being the 2020 pay award or 1920 pay award being weighted towards the lower end of pay scales. Longer service compared to previous years amongst the female group also means that the overall females made greater incremental progression within existing grades, and turnover we saw during 2019-2020 was mainly associated with male employees, meaning that there was a converse overall effect on where males sat incrementally within their overall grades. There were also some positive news, such as promotions within the female group, and given that the group is relatively small, such changes, such progression actually has quite a significant effect on the position. I note that within the report, so that really deals with the statistical position. Paragraph 2014 of the report details how previously agreed actions to address the gap have been progressed since the last report we made, and the anticipated actions for the coming year to progress matters further are detailed at 2015 of the report. Basically, members are being asked to note the report before its publication on our website. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for Andrew on this report, please? I was going to say there are none, but then all of a sudden, Councillor Wheeler.
Just a detail, Chair, thank you. Page 131, paragraph 4, relevant to previous decisions. Joint Committee endorsed a set of actions to improve the gender pay gap. It's March 2020 meeting. Have they been actioned? What?
The actions were, or the progress have been made are stated within paragraph 2.14. So the actions we've taken, we've actually have developed a comprehensive training plan that is using technology. So it has been available to shift workers and in fact those working away from the office during this.
So, sorry, Chair, can I interrupt, Andrew? The paragraphs 2.13 and 2.14 are referring to a set of actions developed at the June 2019 meeting. I was looking at the ones that we mentioned at March 2020 meeting in 4.1. Are they the same actions?
They are the same actions, and I'm afraid that
it
should have been 2019, given that we did not report last year because of the.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks, Chair.
Okay,
Thank you, Councillor Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is only for information, Andrew. You may well be aware of it, but I think it will probably please Pam if she's not aware, that with one exception now, and since this week, in Cornwall, the appointment of a lady for the Chief Fire Officer for our area, all the top posts in the council and the top 2 tiers are taken by ladies. So there's no glass ceiling in Cornwall Council. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Holly. I do believe that this report is just for noting and doesn't need a vote. and I'm sure I will soon be corrected if I am wrong, which obviously I'm not wrong because I'm not being corrected. So we now move to item number 10, which was any other business that the chairman considers to be urgent. I have none, but before I close the meeting, as the joint chair at the moment that is sitting chairing this meeting, it's been a difficult last 12 months for everybody. And I think on behalf of myself and Councillor Tamlin, the joint chair, I think we really do need to thank the officers for all the work that they have put in, and please pass on our sincere thanks to all of your employees for the work that they have done. It's been greatly appreciated. And on behalf of myself and Councillor Tamlin, I want to thank members for the way that these meetings have been conducted, for all of their support and all of their work. And for those of you that are retiring from politics, those of you that are restanding, those of you that are continuing to be elected, I wish you all the very best over the next few months and look forward to a new committee being up and running in June. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.